Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend the next hour together. I'm hoping you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. Coming up tonight, we have City Council member Jessica Green from the Louisville Metro Council. She'll be talking about the Breonna Taylor case and that grand jury confusion that's going on right now in terms of whether or not Daniel Cameron will go ahead and release the transcripts related to that trial as it pertains to Breonna Taylor's death last March 13th. She'll also be talking to us about a new police chief that will be coming into office, a Black woman. Stay around as we talk about that coming up later in the broadcast. But right now, my opening observations, and that is on the debate. I always say in this show that you matter. The question is, do the two men who are running for the office of President of the United States really look at you as people who matter? Do Black lives matter? Do American lives matter? And after watching last night's raucous, vitriolic debate, some people today are scratching their heads in utter disappointment, shaking their heads, wondering what happened. We'll be talking about this, and we'll be talking about the fact, has the age of civility gone from America? We'll have a lot of people coming on to talk about this tonight. And the question is, how do we move forward? Well, the candidates are on the campaign trail now, explaining away what took place last night. But what really matters to you? That is what they need to be focused on. And we did not see a good example of that last evening. And those are my opening observations. Well, for those of us who watched last night's debate, many of us are still wondering what happened and what did we watch and how do we move forward? So joining me now to weigh in on all of this as we analyze and comment on the debate, I have with me the DeLuise brothers, Craig and David DeLuise. They are both brothers and they have opposite sides of views. And so we want to bring them in right now to weigh in on what they saw last night and how it's all falling out. Craig, we'll begin with you. We should point out that you're the Republican of the family. What did you see last night in the president?
Well, first of all, I'll say that the overall debate just seemed like watching grumpier old men. I really do believe, and I saw someone post on social media that this is the result of the devaluation of intellectualism. And that's what I believe we saw last night. And I thought it was a disappointing performance by both the president and the vice president. I would have liked to have seen more substantive issues and conversations. The fact is President Trump operates, almost seems to operate on a chaos theory. And that was on full display last night.
David, what did you see last night? And you're the Democrat.
I am. What I saw last night was Biden came to play fair. Trump came to filibuster, delay, and control the tempo, control the event. And I think Trump controlled the debate, but I think it was all bad. I believe that there were missed opportunities on both sides. I think Biden had an opportunity, I think, to get some blows in against the president, both on taxes and I think regarding his son Beau Biden. But I think that he missed those opportunities. But by and large, however, I think Vice President Biden did what he needed to do. He avoided any major gaffes, and he allowed the president to be the president, do what he does, and let the American people decide who they'd rather have as their president.
Craig, well, how do you look at the president's refusal to say that white supremacy is wrong?
Well, first of all, I think it's a red herring to ask the president to do something he's already done. There's actually, and there's a 2018 interview where he clearly has denounced white nationalism. He's clearly denounced white supremacy. David, I've already posted it on my social media, so I've already listened to it. So yes, he has. What I find interesting was that the vice president still has not denounced Antifa. He still hasn't denounced violence, and no, he hasn't. Do me a favor, go ahead and you share it on our social media page. I'll be looking for it. But no, he hasn't.
The bottom line, though, as we look at all this, is that it was Joe Biden who said last night that violence should not be tolerated in protests and that peaceful protesting should be done. And the president of the United States had a chance last night to say once again, he might have said it in 2018, but he had a chance last night to say it during a live presidential debate that white supremacy is wrong. Instead, he called out the Proud Boys, and they have taken it very seriously to the point that they're actually touting it, that they were mentioned, a white supremacist group, and that the president told them to stand down and stand by. What does that mean to you, Craig? And
Well, first of all,
Yeah, what does that mean?
what I know of the Proud Boys is that they are not a white supremacist group. They are a group that tends to lean towards violence. It actually started as a joke by some media commentator, but it's not a white supremacist group. It is a group, however, that does actually bring violence to the table. It's not a group that I like or a group that I support, and I believe it is a group that should be called out on the carpet. But my issue is that every time a group comes out that is conservative or right leaning, once again, folks just say, well, they're white supremacists. I'm like, define what a white supremacist is. If being conservative makes you a white supremacist, then you're trying to call me a white supremacist.
Poverty Law Center has identified the Proud Boys as the Southern Poverty Law Center has identified
is a left wing. The Southern Poverty Law Center is a left wing hate group.
They're not.
Yes, they are.
They
are a left wing hate group. I'm sorry.
Let me step in here and be the moderator. Let your brother have his final word, and then we'll agree to disagree, but still try to end in harmony since you guys are family.
Look, they've been identified as a hate group. At the end of the day, Craig, Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He has to be the president of all the people, and you have to be willing to publicly denounce groups like this. He was unwilling to do it. He was unwilling to do it in 2017. He was unwilling to do it in 2018, and he was unwilling to do it when asked on national television with all the eyes of the country on him. He was unwilling to do it. That's because he supports them and he believes them. He may not be racist, but many of his friends are.
We'll be back with more. We're going to talk to a couple of other people, some people who are weighing in on the issue as well. That's next. So what can we say about last night's debate? Well, weighing in on this issue are two political commentators and analysts, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver and Erica Savage Wilson. Ladies, good of you to join us today. And I wanted to hear from you because, one, you follow politics. Two, you're women, Black women, and you understand how important and pivotal this election is. If there's any good thing out of last night's debate, is it the fact that people need to vote?
Absolutely. I think that was made clear after the histrionics that we witnessed last night from the person that currently inhabits the White House. What we saw was just an unprecedented display of just ignorance, disrespect, not only for his opponent, not only for the actual rules that his own team had agreed to in terms of the parameters of that debate. That was disrespect of the American people. For him to get up there and selfishly have a 90-minute temper tantrum as if he was a 2-year-old that needed to be put in timeout. It is, I think another thing that I think was very important that was demonstrated last night is that this puts to rest any question as to whether or not we have a white supremacist in the White House. Yes. I don't even want anyone to even raise that question again, because that has been put to rest last night when he could not bring himself to in any way admonish white supremacists. And instead he eggs on the Proud Boys, which is a hate group, to be, in my messaging, violent. When he's saying stand by, That's about getting yourself ready. And they have been so energized by that statement. They've already created a new graphic, which it looks like they've taken it up as their new motto. So yes, he's a white supremacist. Another thing I would suggest to you, if you realize, at one point, Joe Biden specifically called him a racist. He didn't even flinch. He didn't even flinch. He didn't even say, no, I'm not. We all knew that would have been a lie, but he didn't even say that. So I don't even want to hear anybody raise the question about whether this man is a white supremacist. He is what he is. He demonstrated it last night. This is, if there's any other reason that you are wavering about whether or not this man should be in the White House, I think that puts it to rest. We don't need a white supremacist and a white nationalist with all the levers and the powers of the government in his hands. And quite frankly, someone who cannot control himself more than 2 minutes with the nuclear codes in the White House anymore. He needs to be gone.
Erica, what are your concerns?
I absolutely agree with Dr. Avis. And not only are we seeing a person who lacks self-control, we've also seen the lack of discipline around his finances. As a person that formerly worked in the federal government, was a member of the military, I can assure you and tell you that I would not have been able to enter into either one of those federal entities, any of those government type of occupations, if my finances had been 1/100th of what Donald John Trump's are. So we're seeing that this level of person who carries that type of lack of discipline in his finances and the lack in his behavior as well, also telegraphed to the entire globe that the United States does not have its business together. When we're thinking about the 207,232 people that have died as a lack of his own discipline to develop a national strategy plan around COVID-19 to help not only protect his base, but the entire ecosystem of the United States. That is what we saw on last night's debate stage. And then to add to that, that you did have in former Vice President Joe Biden, someone who was civil, someone who was very measured with his words, and yet and still this occupant of the White House still made it his business to really trample across words that he was, the conversations that he was having with the American people, checking in to ask us how we were doing, connecting how his level of chaos is affecting folks economically in their housing, and also in them being able to find a job because of his lack of strategy around COVID-19 testing and mask mandates. And then we move into and we see his level of lack of self-control, behavior, discipline, when former Vice President Joseph Biden began to talk about his son who has passed away, Beau Biden, served in the military, and began to go after Trump on his record, calling members of the military and those who gave their life suckers and losers, and to say that his son was not in fact a sucker or loser, that same undisciplined person thought it to be best to actually move into him responding and then begin to denigrate his son, Hunter Biden, which has nothing to do with this presidential debate. So I think that when we're thinking about this election, it is not a persuasion election. This is an election to let people who did not participate in the 2016 vote because of Russian interference and disinformation, and just really lack of really seeing themselves folded into the national conversation, to look at that debate and to say, would you be able to behave in the way that this assumed president has and still be able to maintain your freedom, still be able to apply for loans and receive loans? No, everybody has to comport themselves in a certain way in order to get business done, in order to take care of things that need to be taken care of. Why would you want somebody leading you that does not exhibit that same discipline and does not care, and that will go to any lengths to get his point across, including stepping over the grave of his opponent's dead son?
Erica and Avis, where do we go from here? community or chaos?
Community and community coming out. You can vote early now in many states across the nation. It's very important that people research the parameters around the voting rules in their states. But the most important thing is that you vote, that you bring your whole family, your whole network with you. We have got to get this man out of the White House. It is imperative. There is so much at stake. As I've said many times before, you're not just voting for the next 4 years, you're voting for the next 40 years. And that's especially clear now as we're on the precipice of having yet another Supreme Court justice, which would tilt the court in a 6-3 conservative majority. This man has already appointed 1 out of 4 judges at the federal level. Imagine what he would do. Imagine what he would do with another term. And so all of that to say that this is the most critical election that any of us have experienced in our lifetimes. And if you sat down last time, do not sit down this time. Do not wait it out. Do not waste your vote on someone that has absolutely zero chance of winning, a la Kanye West. Focus your power in a space that can get this racist, white supremacist out of the White House. And then after you vote, hold the next president, Joe Biden, accountable for what you want. Voting is the beginning of your political action. It is not the end of it.
Erica?
Yeah. Absolutely, community. Community is what we've been able to see that has really moved the needle forward when we think about the 1960s and the Fair Housing Act, when we think about the Voting Rights Act, we think about those big pieces of federal legislation really responsible for helping to free us, move the needle forward a bit. And that happened because of communities. It was people that came together in their homes, in their neighborhoods, in churches that said that, no, this is what this document says, and we're going to make sure that our community is able to fully participate in this. And so what Dr. Avis said about finding your space, do that. One of the things that I talk about 3 days throughout the week is the 5 things to have is not only to check your registration to vote, have your vote plan together, that folks research the ballot so they'll understand not just the top ticket, but also those down ballot races, what's going to impact us in our daily lives within our communities, local and state politics. But that then we also look into actually participating in another way, which is becoming a poll worker, because we heard last night that 45 telegraphed to say that, the poll workers that he had to go out in Pennsylvania, that they weren't as successful, that they were turned around. I saw that in 2016, working on the reelection campaign of a member of Congress, that there were poll workers, these people that were, in fact, 45 supporters in 2016, coming out to areas where there were heavily Black areas and just standing about. So what I say to that is, listen, activate yourself, particularly in spaces where we've seen our mothers and fathers and grandparents actively participate. Get a part of that process so you know also how the sausage is made to a certain extent. So when we actually engage in that way, when we see people that look like us and community people and allies to our left and our right, then what we're actually doing is we're moving against the chaos and we're standing in the fact that we will win. But the only way that we will win is if that we do, in fact, turn out those people that did not participate in 2016. And as Dr. Ravis said, let them know, listen, this is a 2-horse race. This is not a third party. There's no Kanye West. We're talking about the difference between the way the country has been going and the way that we actually want to move in the direction of.
Very troubling times. And yet, as you're talking about, it has to be a community effort to change the tide and move things forward for this country. Erica Savage Wilson, Dr. Avis Jones DeWeaver, thank you for your comments. Obviously, we'll be talking about this a lot more as we now have 34 days left between now and the election of a new president. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
When we
Kelly.
return, we come back with more of political analysts from other people who are following the debate and also following the political campaign. Back with more after this. Well, joining me now is the West Coast Connection. They've returned. They're in the house again. And brothers, attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. What did we see last night?
Let me just say it this way to start out. If I had behaved that way and my mother was still alive, she would have slapped the taste out of my mouth. That was embarrassing. That was something that goes beyond any words that I have to describe how disappointed I was. I consider myself a patriot. I don't see patriotism to the Proud Boys. The president's spectacle last night, and to a certain extent, Vice President Biden being carried away by some of the antics, to call the president of the United States a fool and a clown. What does that say to our children and our grandchildren? I was so disappointed, Kelly. I continue to be, and there's nothing there. Words do not appropriately describe how disappointed I was in last night's performance.
Timothy?
Well, I wasn't shocked. I knew that President Trump would do everything imaginable to get into the head of Joe Biden. There are two athletes that come to mind, the greatest of all times, Muhammad Ali, who was known as the Louisville Lip. And then, of course, in current sports, Patrick Beverley with the Los Angeles Clippers. Both have, of course, Ali was the greatest heavyweight of all times. My father would argue that it was Joe Louis. God rest my father and Joe Louis and Muhammad Ali's soul. But they have the knack for getting into the opponent's head. And I think when Joe Biden said, "I am the party, I am the Democratic Party," it was that Charlemagne the God moment, because President Trump had gotten into his head. With that being said, I think Biden clearly won. I think he displayed more of the modicum of what, or image of what the leader of the free world, the commander in chief, should in fact portray. But watching Fox News after the program, which I said, okay, let me see what the other side is saying. There are people out there that like that cage match. They want to see an alpha male with no guardrails, just be able to do whatever and however he wants. And that's what President Trump did last night.
But that does not define a democracy.
And they're comfortable with it as long as it's no disrespect, as long as it's a Caucasian male. I think that white privilege was on full display. If Barack Obama had behaved that way, I don't think those same people would be embracing that kind of behavior. I don't think any sane person, mature person, could embrace that type of behavior. And quite honestly, with all due respect to those who feel differently, this isn't sports. This is life. This is our country. This is our democracy. The behavior that the president exhibited last night was inexcusable. It's not enough to say, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. This isn't anything to be. People laughed 4 years ago when he called Marco Rubio Little Marco, and he called Joe Biden Sleepy Joe Biden and Crooked Hillary. People giggled about that. Even people who didn't wind up voting for him thought he was funny. It's not funny anymore. We have 205,000 deaths that get laid appropriately at the president's door. It's time for him to put his big boy pants on and grow the hell up.
But this is who he is. And he's been showing us this long before he became president of the United States. I'm shocked that people are shocked. That's where my shock is. He has shown us that this is his style. This goes back many, many, many years. He wanted the death penalty for the Central Park Five, who did not kill, who were all found innocent, who were all acquitted. So this is him. This is who he is. And I think people have to stop acting shocked and understand who the opponent really is.
I'm talking to attorneys Timothy Allen Simon and attorney Mark Harris. When we return, we'll continue to talk more about this debate or this debacle and find out what it means for the American people. And so many missed opportunities last night, especially in terms of healing the racial divide in this country. Coming back with more after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm talking to attorneys Mark Harris and Timothy Allen Simon. And I should point out that Mark Harris is a civil rights attorney, a Ben Crump law partner. And then we have Timothy Allen Simon, who of course owns TAS Strategies. serves as the chairman of the board of directors for the California Black Chamber of Commerce, California having the 5th largest economy in the world. So gentlemen, both of you have worked for different, not just different campaigns, but you've worked in different offices. Mark, you had worked for President Clinton in Washington, and Timothy, you worked with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was a Republican leading at one time California. One thing that got me was the fact that when Biden talked about his son, Beau Biden, and then also talked about his son, Hunter Biden, and the painful admission that his son had gone through a drug problem and overcome that, but also the honor that he still served and the love that he expressed for his son, as well as for Beau Biden's service to this country. I saw no empathy coming from the president of the United States. I saw more of the attack, and I just thought this is shocking, and it should shock everyone, even those who support the president.
His embracing and condoning white supremacy was the low for me, Kelly. I think that if the question is how low can he go, armed insurrection is about as low as he can go. And he came as close as any person I've ever seen in the position that he's in, stoking the flames of armed insurrection when he reached out. And now what has become the motto of the Proud Boys, which is this era's Ku Klux Klan. Let's not be cute about who the Proud Boys are. They're this era's Ku Klux Klan. When you have people who are commentators on CNN and other networks say that their family members and friends are saying to them, should we go out and buy handguns? Should we go out and arm ourselves? That's about as low as it can go, is when we have armed insurrection in our streets, more than what we've seen relative to the reaction to the protest in Portland and other parts of the country. We could actually get to a point around this election where we have a horrific uprising, violent uprising. And I think the president set the stage for that last night.
Yeah, Timothy, it's almost like the dog whistle was not only put out there, but the bait was also put out there to stand down and stand by. What does that mean?
Well, that was a bullhorn. That wasn't a dog whistle. That was his message. And we remember his remarks when he said, you know, there's some really bad people in this country that love me. You know, that was the coach, you know, screaming a play from the sidelines. That's really what that was. And there's no reason for us to think anything otherwise. This man knows what he said, and he said it for a reason. I would also say, though, that in terms of the Biden team, they knew that the president was going to come at Beau Biden. They knew that. And I don't believe that the vice president effectively deflected it and kept his message to the American people. When he looked in the camera at the people, I thought he was at his best. When he allowed Trump to distract him, he fell to his low. But let me also say that when he spoke about addiction and his son overcoming addiction, you know, we've criminalized drug addiction in this country, and that is a grave, grave mistake. And that had a lot to do with the omnibus crime bill. And I believe by Joe Biden talking about his son becoming clean and sober and overcoming that drug addiction, he had a message to the people of this country, a country that has one of the biggest self-medication addiction problems in the world. And I felt that was his shining moment, actually. I think he connected with the people. I don't know of a family that has not had to deal with some form of drug addiction or alcoholism or other addictions that have harmed families. And I believe he gave a message to all of you that I share your pain. I have someone that has had that journey. And I thought that was one of his shining moments.
We'll continue to watch it. Timothy Allen Simon, Mark Harris, appreciate you both. Looking forward to talking to you soon and very soon as we continue to follow the developments happening with regard to our country's future. Thank you both. We'll be back with more after this. In fact, we'll be talking about the Breonna Taylor case next. Well, what's happening in the Breonna Taylor case? What's going on with the grand jury? And in particular, what is happening with the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, and in terms of him responding to the request from the family of Breonna Taylor to have the transcripts of this grand jury released so they can find out what Mr. Cameron actually presented to the grand jury. So joining me now is a member of the Louisville Metro Council, the city council there in Louisville. She's also a former prosecutor. Jessica Green joins me now. Jessica, thanks for joining me. Can you bring me up to date on what's unfolding in this? It seems like there's so many changes going on right now. Tell me what's happening right now with the grand jury.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for having me on. There have been some big time and kind of crazy things happening in Louisville in relation to the grand jury testimony in the Breonna Taylor case. The first thing that happened early this week was that the defendant, Brett Hankinson, was he entered a plea of not guilty. He was arraigned before Circuit Court Judge Ann Bailey Smith. Judge Bailey Smith ordered the release of the grand jury proceedings as part of that case. That has been the typical practice of what has occurred in Jefferson County. And per the rules, the judges always have the ability to order the release of grand jury testimony. So Judge Smith did that early on Monday. Subsequent to that time on Monday, a grand juror filed a motion. They were retained by counsel, and they actually filed suit to be allowed to be able to talk about the case. They also filed suit to release the grand jury proceedings. Their attorneys have had several press conferences over the course of the last day and a half. And so that juror is very eager to talk about what is on the record and what is also not on the record. Yesterday, Attorney General Daniel Cameron indicated that he would not object to Judge Smith's order to release the transcripts, nor would he object to the grand jury's request that that information be released. Today, I see in the media that General Cameron has requested to be able to have an extension in time to be able to provide the grand jury testimony. He indicates that there is about 20 hours worth of testimony, and states that he would like to redact some of the personal information of the other grand jurors. Also looming out there is there's been something that has been filed by grand jury witnesses 1 through 13, and these individuals have filed suit to have their personal information redacted. So we have had a busy day and a half to 2 days here in Louisville. So lots of things going on with those grand jury proceedings. And I know that everybody is very eager to see what was included, what was not included. And obviously there is a safety interest in making sure that the jurors and the witnesses are protected as well.
Absolutely. But when you look at this and last week's demand from the family, the public demand for Attorney General Cameron to release the documents and release the transcripts so they could know how Breonna Taylor was represented, or if in fact she was presented to the grand jury. That seems to be the sticking point here. And now you have the Attorney General stating that, well, wait a minute, I was going to release everything, but now he's redacting certain statements, obviously for what he says could be privacy issues. But let's get right to the point here. Has justice, in your opinion, been served to the citizens of Louisville and understanding what really took place last March 13th in that apartment building that Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend lived in?
I would say an unequivocally, absolutely no. It blew my mind to learn that General Cameron never even presented charges in relation to Breonna Taylor. What is interesting and what has already come out in some of the statements that he's made to the public was that he and his office, they unilaterally decided that these individuals had a self-defense claim against Breonna Taylor. And they also unilaterally decided to not present evidence about the neighbor above her. It's so interesting to me because, again, I've been a prosecutor before. These are defenses that you would require the typical defendant to have to raise at trial, not for the prosecutor himself to decide without even a presentation to the grand jury for them to even be able to even consider whether or not charges are appropriate. It blew my mind to hear him say, well, the grand jury is an independent body. If they had wanted to indict, they could have still had the ability to go ahead and indict. And again, anybody who knows how this system works, first of all, it was a shame for General Cameron to try to pump the ball to the grand jury, as opposed to just accepting responsibility himself and saying, you know what, I did not find the value in this Black woman's life. So we didn't even mention her. We didn't even present any information, any charges about her. And so with how the world is looking and watching Louisville and has watched the Breonna Taylor case, the fact that she was not even mentioned, the fact that everything that occurred in her day, in her life, in her death on that day was not brought up, it tells me everything that we should know about Daniel Cameron. And in my opinion, he's an individual who has drawn a line in the sand and who has stated that the value of Black female life in this country, in this state, doesn't mean a doggone thing. And it is sickening. And it's like a sucker punch to the gut every time I think about it. The fact that this man didn't even present any charges in relation to Breonna Taylor. What a travesty of a miscarriage of justice to the memory of Breonna, to the family, and to the public.
I'll continue my conversation with Louisville Councilmember Jessica Green right after this. The public is out protesting still.
Yes.
Those protests are turning to become more peaceful now, which is what you and the family of Breonna Taylor, as well as her attorneys, have been requesting for people to be peaceful. Are you finding that they're complying with that now?
I think that the vast majority of the protests are peaceful now. I believe the vast majority of the protests have been peaceful throughout. We have had a few bad actors, but as I said previously, I reject the notion that we should lump all protesters in with the bad actors, just in the same way as many people, justifiably so, reject the notion that we should lump all officers into the same batch as the bad actors. And so if there are bad actors and if there are violent individuals who are out there, I hope and I expect that those individuals are going to be held to the full extent of the law. And I want the peaceful protesters to still continue to have the opportunity to have their voices heard, to be able to still be able to lift up the name and the memory of Miss Taylor. She deserves it.
The other changes, police, have they made changes to your satisfaction with regard to how they conduct warrants in the future?
So we continue to look and review that. As a matter of fact, I have a public safety committee meeting that I chair that's beginning in about an hour. And we have a piece of legislation on there that is a de-escalation piece of legislation that I have authored. And so we continue to move, we continue to push the pendulum. I do not believe that enough has been done. We do have a new police chief that is beginning tomorrow in Louisville, a Black female police chief that is beginning and will be starting tomorrow on October the 1st. That, coupled with changes in the standard operating procedures as well as legislation that Metro Council is passing and working on, I'm hopeful that we will begin to see the tide turning.
A Black female police chief coming into office tomorrow. What's her name, and what do you anticipate will be her approach and her vision for not only the city of Louisville, but for her police department?
Her name is Yvette Gentry. She is a longtime police officer who is well decorated, but she is also has her hand and her pulse on the community. She is very strong-willed and has a strong backbone. She has stated publicly that she will not be utilized as a puppet. She is only going to be the interim police chief. She had no interest in applying for the permanent post, but she will be in place until we get a new police chief in. And I think that she's going to do some things to shake up some things that everybody may not always be happy with. But I also think that she brings a wealth of experience of being a police officer and also a wealth of experience of being a Black woman, of being a mother of Black boys in Louisville, Kentucky. And so I'm excited to welcome Chief Gentry, and I think that she will be good for the city of Louisville.
Jessica Green, former prosecutor, head of the Public Safety Committee there with the Louisville Metro Council. You're serving on that council right now, on that committee. Thank you for spending your time. And to the Breonna Taylor family, let them know our prayers are with them as they continue to mourn the loss of Breonna Taylor and continue to fight for bringing justice to her name by not only saying her name, but actually defending her name. Thank you. And welcome back. I want to thank all of the guests who appeared on tonight's program. I especially want to thank each and every one of you for watching, taking the time out of your busy schedule to join me. As we move forward, wondering what will take place between now and Election Day, one fundamental thing remains. Be sure to vote. We will not tell you who to vote for, but be sure you vote. Exercise your right to determine the future of this country. As always, we hope you've received some knowledge and been righted, united, and ignited to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace. Lord knows we need it. Good night.
Come on, all aboard. Let me break it down for you like this. The rhythm of love is easy to find if you're listening. The color of light isn't red, black, or white, but it's crimson. We all bleed the same. If you don't feel the groove, it's alright. Just give it time, give it time. Come on, y'all. Get on board. Mankind won't survive if our hearts beat inside a hateful rhythm. You see, love isn't bought, but comes with a price of forgiveness, and we all bleed the same. Yeah. If you don't feel it now, just wait. It's coming on, the love train. Just give it time, give it time. Get on board. That means you and you and you on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, brothers, all sisters and sisters on the love train. Get on board the love train. Everyone's invited. We're all united on the love train. Get on board. All creeds and colors, my sisters and brothers, get on board on the love train. Woo-hoo! Yeah. Yeah. It's all right.